Hey there, guys. All right, today we are back with some more geography now. And this time, Anta is going to tell us Niger. I'm going to be pronouncing it Niger, because I can. Now, before we dive in, make sure you go and check out the links in the description box below. I would love it if you joined the Discord and followed me over at Twitch. And please do go and check out my gaming channel here on YouTube. Really, just still, as always, still pushing it. Anyways, checking to make sure new camera does not freeze. Not freezing, we're good, we're still moving, we're still nice and smooth. Whoa. My hair is looking awful today. Anyways, let's go ahead and dive into Niger. Actually, you know what? It does sound better to say Niger. I'm gonna say Niger.
Niger, not Nigeria. Two completely different countries, equally fascinating. One has skyscrapers and oil fields, the other has uranium and dancing face-painted men that put on a beauty pageant for female judges that get to sleep with the winner that they select.
Can I compete?
It's time
Just wondering.
geography.
No! Hey everybody, I'm your host Barbs. Not too many people know too much about Niger. It doesn't pop up on many tourism sites and is usually just a footnote in the books about Africa. Literally, in Lonely Planet's book on West Africa, this is all they have on Niger. But for what it's
I mean, West Africa does have a lot of countries.
worth, this country is fascinating
was
to say the
quite a
least,
little.
and dare I say it, a top destination if you're exploring the obscure, lesser-known reaches of the planet. And speaking of the planet, here's the map.
Bum, bum, bum.
Now, if there was any country that exemplified the definition of a Saharan nation, it would probably be either Niger or Mauritania. Remember that episode? Man, one day I want to ride that train. Niger played an important role throughout history, and if you dig deep in the sand, you'll start to understand why. First of all, the country is the largest in West Africa, landlocked, bordered by 7 other countries, and makes up 1.3 million square kilometers or 500,000 square miles. And the shape of the country kind of looks like a chicken drumstick. The country is divided into
Yummy.
7 regions and 1 capital.
That was the most normal shape comparison he's ever made for these countries. A chicken drumstick.
Capital district for the capital and largest city, Niamey, located in the southwest. After that, the second largest city is Zinder in the southeast and Maradi in the central south. Speaking of which, about 95% of the population lives in the south, where most of the road networks lie. The largest and least populated of the regions is the massive Agadez region in the north, where only one paved road goes all the way up and stops at the mining town of Arlit. Otherwise, from there are only dirt paths through the desert that reach the nearly uninhabited outskirts of the unforgiving northeastern Saharan region. They extend to the furthest settlement, Madalma, a military outpost that patrols the border with Libya and Chad. Otherwise, from Libya, you have only one main road that passes through the Kuru Arkene airstrip that is actually split by the border of both countries, and from there, good luck. Within the country, there are 2 international airports, Niamey's Diori Hamani International and Agadez's Mano Dayak International up north. Currently, the country is in the process of constructing a rail line that will connect to Benin and onwards to the port of Cotonou for cargo transport to the Atlantic Ocean. A station has already been built at Niamey, and future stations are being worked on. Now, aside from some river boundaries in the south, most of the current borders of Niger were kind of arbitrarily drawn between the French and other regional powers during colonial
Sounds about colonial.
times. Until 1931, Niger actually kind of used to have half of Chad's land, but then it was like...
All right, West and Central African colonies, how we doing?
We hate you.
Good as usual, I see. Anyways, is there anything you'd like to discuss?
Yeah, now that you mention it, why does Niger get like the entire Tibesti and Edi Plateau when most of its people are over 2,000 kilometers away?
I mean, you drew these lines. What do you expect me to say?
Okay, fine, Chad. You're taking over the Aneti area thing.
Fine,
Thank you,
but we still hate you.
Otherwise, if Niger was known for something, it would be kind of like the country with the most remote and difficult to reach landmarks, hidden away in the empty, uninhabited deserts with limited access options. I mean, if you zoom in, you can see the UTA Flight 772 crash site monument with no roads leading to it. It's just a monument in the middle of the sand,
That's fucking ominous as fuck.
hundreds of kilometers away from the nearest town. A bit west, there used to be one last living tree in the middle of the Tenere Desert, with no others in a 400-kilometer radius until a drunk driver knocked it over in the 70s, and now they've placed a metallic monument in the tree's honor.
How the fuck do you... How? How are you so drunk that you hit the only thing in a 400-kilometer radius? Like, I'm not crazy here, am I?
honor. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. If you decide to visit, some places of interest might include things like this desert caravan town, the Maradi Palace and Grand Bazaar, the National Museum of Niger, the Jado and Jaba city ruins, Agadez Grand Mosque, the Ayoru Hippo tours, this old
I ain't going anywhere near a fucking hippo. Those things, no, absolutely not. That cave was caved. That skull was caved in.
cemetery in Gobero, these cave engravings, the Tuareg festival grounds and markets of Taua.
God, y'all, you heard me say this during, I think, a couple previous episodes, but that shade of blue, a gorgeous blue.
The really difficult to get to lush crop oasis of Timia, Kaure Giraffe Reserve, the Animal Bazaar of Balayara. Zinder is kind of like the cultural capital of the country with ruins, the Birni Quarter, and
I
the
love me
Sultan's
some
Palace.
ruins.
Oh, and there's a national park called W National Park. Yeah, that's just the name W National Park. It's pretty cool, with lots of animals and stuff. And speaking of nature and animals, this makes the perfect transition into the next segment, the... Now, Niger sticks out physically because on the surface, it seems kind of desolate, but if you look closer, you'll see all these weird clues that give you a picture on how the area used to look like thousands of years ago before the desert took over. First of all, Niger is one of the hottest countries on Earth, often called the frying pan of the world. I mean, if you disregard the chicken drumstick thing, it also kind of looks like a frying pan. Raindrops are said to sometimes evaporate before they even hit the ground. About 80% of the country is made up of Saharan and Tenere Desert, which by the way holds the Aer and Tenere Nature Reserves, a UNESCO World Heritage Site and the 4th largest nature reserve in the world. The country has 3 main extinct volcano lava field plateaus, the Jabo Plateau in the northeast, the smaller Zinder Plateau further south, where you can find the tallest peak, Idukal Ntages. Almost the entire country is located in either the Sahara or Sahel zone, which gives them a line of agriculture versus a line of grazing for livestock. This little dangling salient right here in the south of the Tillaberi region is part of the W National Park and is the wettest and greenest area in all of Niger. To the west, you get the longest and most important river of the country, the Niger River, where the country gets its name from, passing through the capital Niamey. The Niger River is strange because it kind of flows in a backwards crescent, starting in the Guinea Highlands and then ends in the Gulf of Guinea in Nigeria. This river provides water and irrigation to over a quarter of the entire population. If you zoom in on the Tahua region, you can even see the outline of former flowing river tributaries that irrigated much of the land inland. Otherwise, a series of guelta, or drainage basins, can be found all over, about 1,000 of them in the country, 175 of which are permanent, fed by underwater aquifers. They provide many outskirt communities with water as well. The largest inland body of water is the northwestern section of Lake Chad, split between 4 countries, and today it is seeing the effects of desertification and drying up, unfortunately. Yeah, Niger is quite dry, but they have their way of getting around and adapting. And speaking of dry, it's time for my triple shot of espresso break, which means the one and only Noah takes over this segment.
Fucking go.
Here, hold this, would you?
Now, as we mentioned, Niger is interesting because long ago, much of it was covered in savanna and grassland before the sands came in. Only about 1% of the land is covered in forests, and about 3% is cultivated for farming. This is kind of mind-boggling, considering that somewhere around 87% of the workforce is engaged in agriculture, and so...
What? 3% of the land, but 87% of the workforce. That's insane to me. That's insane.
Now, take into account that they constantly face droughts and desertification, and it's quite a tense situation, to say the least. The crops they mostly grow are groundnuts and cotton, with a somewhat noticeable livestock trade, mostly with Nigeria. Nonetheless, it's mineral exports that make them the most money at about 40% of the overall exports. There was even a gold rush when gold was discovered in the Jabo Plateau in 2014. Yeah, you would think the Sahara is just a bunch of useless sand and rocks, but nope. Nonetheless, the Agadez region is a moneymaker, being the 5th largest uranium producer on Earth, with a mine close to the town of Arlit. Otherwise, despite the lack of cropland, they still have their own national dishes, which brings us to food. First off, most meals start with a staple starch, the most common one being millet. Fish is the most common meat, specifically mackerel. Stews are very common as well. Otherwise, you have dishes like kilishi, moringa, kola nuts, wache, spiced crickets, katabara, brochettes, pura, ogbono, or African bush mango. And of course, like much of West Africa, they have their own version of jollof rice.
Yeah, their version, but not the original.
Excuse me?
And speaking of their own versions of things, let's talk about the versions of people, shall we?
There need to be more food there. There's totally more Niger food. Totally.
Thank you, Noah.
You're welcome.
Okay, so first of all, a person from Niger is called a Nigerian with an E. Add an A and you have Nigerian, which is the next episode after this. Much like almost every African country, the people of Niger come from a slew of ethno-linguistic people groups. Each have their own customs, traditions, tribal affiliation, and story. And the story of Niger gets pretty interesting when you break it down. First of all, the country has about 21 million people and as of 2019 has the world's highest birth rate with about 7 births per woman, making them the lowest medium age per population at about 15.4 years. The country is made up of a number of ethnicities, the largest parent group being the Hausa at about 53%, the Zarma Songhai at 21.2%, the Tuareg at about 10.4%, the Fula at about another 10%, and the rest are other groups like the Kanuri Manga, the Tubu, a few Arabs, and others. They use the West African franc as their currency, they use the types A, B, C, D, and E, and F type plug outlets, yeah, they use a lot, and they drive on the right side of the...
Let's fucking go, Niger! Woo! That's what I'm talking about, baby! The right side of the road. It's correct. Take that, Britain and other wrong countries.
Road. As a former French colony, of course, French is the official language of administration. It's used mostly to intercommunicate amongst the various people groups. However, there are 10 recognized national languages spoken by the majority of people, Hausa and Zarma Songhai being the most commonly spoken. The vast majority of the country claims to be Muslim. However, much like we discussed in the Mali episode, Islam in Niger is kind of different from what you'd find in other Muslim majority areas, and it's kind of hard to get a real percentage on what classifies as doctrinal versus syncretic Islam. Stemming mostly from the Malikite Sunni branch of jurisprudence, you get a lot of African traditional belief syncretism within the Muslim community. This incorporates a lot of influence from animism like shrines, charms, possession rituals, and so on, the most famous one being the Bori cult. Most women do not wear hijabs and often expose their arms, necks, and legs. Alcohol is allowed, they even have...
Remember, hijab, the face covering kind of tradition that we associate with Islam originates in Persian culture. It wasn't a religious thing, so it's melded to become kind of a religious thing. But its origins are not religious. They are cultural to Persia, as far as I remember.
Their own local beer brand. Otherwise, Christians make up the majority of the remaining non-Muslim community. The nation is classified as a secular state, although much of the laws stem from Islam. Niger has a lot of history that dates back millennia BC. It's been part of numerous empires and kingdoms and trade routes that predated colonial rule. I mean, today they even have 5 constituent monarchs in 5 regions. We'll get into that soon. But first, let's kind of break down the largest main people groups, the Hausa, Zarma Songhai, and Tuareg and Fula. And here is Random Hannah to explain.
All right, let's get this started. The Hausa are the largest ethnic group in Africa. They even have their own Hausa flag. They number around 70 million, 10 million of which, mostly on the southern border, are found in Niger. They are mostly known for being very business-oriented, relatively strong in Islamic tradition. They have some very decorative architecture and traditional attire. The Zarma Songhai live mostly in the southwest along the Niger River, and they are known for being the more westernized metropolitan peoples that speak better French and typically work in the service sector. They are famous for the griot performers that tell stories in a musical fashion. They also have interesting traditional huts found close to the...
I think griot, is it griot or griot? I want to say griot. That's where my brain leans. Doesn't that just translate to storyteller? I'm not sure. I did some research on it because one of the groups within one of the areas in my world building for my novels, I have based on the, essentially the Sahara, Western Sahara area, so northern, Morocco kind of area, and sub-Saharan West Africa. A lot of, and so I was doing research on how do they tell their stories, history, oral traditions, etc., blah blah blah, that kind of stuff. Right? Because you have a responsibility as an author to do that fucking research. And yeah, I remember the griots. I want to say griots, but maybe that's just the French way of speaking, and maybe it's actually just griots. I don't know.
The capital. The Tuareg are sometimes called...
Oh, I love that shade of blue. That's such a good blue.
Blue people because of the indigo dyes they wear on their clothing. They mostly reside in the more arid parts of the northern Sahara region, and they even have their own ethnic flag. Related to the Berber and other countries, they have a unique millennia-old history of desert culture. Most of them are divided into castes and clans. Some have tribal markings. Men actually wear the veil, whereas women do not. Camels are commonly used for transport, and you can pretty much tell if someone is Tuareg if they are wearing the cross of Agadez. Finally, the Fulani, or Fula, are the largest nomadic people group on Earth, and Niger has about 2 million. They mostly inhabit the lower central regions of the country. They have a wide range of colorful festivals, rich ceremonies, and traditions. One of the most famous ones being the Gerawal festival of somewhat taboo tradition in the Wadabe tribe. Men put on layers of makeup and do a performance for the women that get to choose the winner. These women often have permission from their husbands to sleep with the winners in an attempt to have beautiful children. Sometimes so.
Okay, I don't know if I could. As the husband, I don't think I'd be cool with that. As a single man, on the other hand.
Social structures across the world are just like that.
Yeah, Nat Geo is actually kind of like obsessed with these people. Anyway, Hannah, thank you. Actually, can I try holding that again?
Yeah.
Oh. Now, of course, there are many other groups and subgroups of Niger with a plethora of unique languages and customs, but those were kind of like the big four. Otherwise, we cannot gloss over the fact that the country does have some social issues widely known already throughout the world. They only recently abolished slavery in 2003, although the practice of caste-based slavery and human trafficking still is an issue that the country faces. For years, there has been a continuous struggle against Boko Haram, which started in Nigeria, and it has a few factions in Niger. Add on top of that, the overall poverty, illiteracy, and political instability through a series of insurrection and coups. You can see how all this kind of puts a struggle on them. Nonetheless, they are still trying to move forward with new modern economic sectors like tourism and resource extraction. It's kind of like...
I'm a tourist. Can I come visit?
Oh yeah, no, I'm good. You know, don't mind all this. It's just internal issues. Totally fine. Come on in, come visit, have a good time. Yeah, it's totally safe.
Otherwise, history. In the quickest way I can put it, prehistoric era, trans-Saharan trade route, Songhai Empire, Islam enters. Meanwhile, Hausa kingdoms in the south and Kanem Bornu Empire in the east. Mali Empire takes over. French expedition years. This queen lady fights back. French abolish slavery amongst the Tuaregs. France has full colonial rule. Independence. First military regime. Uranium boom. Second republic. Third republic. First Tuareg rebellion. Second military regime. Fourth republic and third military regime. Fifth republic. Second Tuareg rebellion. Sixth republic. Seventh republic.
Oh my
and
God.
here we are today. Yeah, 3 military regimes and 7
Alright, that was a decent history segment. I don't think it's as strong as the last few history segments on the channel here. This one was just kind of him stating like names essentially, like republic, military regime, republic, coup, rebellion, blah blah blah. Not really it didn't feel the same as the last couple previous videos did with their history segments, where of course he doesn't go in depth on the explanation, but there was a little bit, felt like this was less. Maybe I'm misremembering, but that's how it felt.
republics and 2 Tuareg rebellions. I told you, it's kind of intense. Otherwise, some notable people from Niger or of Nigerian descent might include people like... Full disclaimer, I'm gonna pronounce all these probably wrong. Al-Fadi, Nisafatu Musa Adamu, Ismail Eragai Alasan, Bombino, Mustafa Alassane, Abdul Razak Isafu, Musa Mazou, Mamane Vasonga. Yeah, for a place with barely any cultivated land, yet fast-growing population of over 20 million, you can tell there's something interesting about this place. Let's see how the outside world responds to the uniqueness now, shall we?
Bum, bum, bum.
Now, Niger is the fastest growing country in Africa with the highest birth rate. This means that with limited resources at their disposal, their dependence on foreign interaction is crucial to the very continuity of their nation's future. For one, even though the colonial past holds a slight sting in the minds of Nigerians, France is not only their largest import and export partner, especially in the uranium sector, but also still has a cultural connection with Niger. They've adopted a lot of French cuisine, French is the official language used for intercommunication, and many students choose to continue their studies in France. Americans are kind of like the backup default outsider when the French aren't concerned. They've been friendly since independence, and even amidst the political drama, they never cut ties. In 2013, they signed an agreement to allow US bases to operate and test military equipment in their territory, as well as help train the Nigerian military. The US also invests in their economy to some extent. In general, their West African neighbors are the closest friends, but it depends on who you ask. If you ask the Hausa community, they'll probably say Nigeria is their best friend, as many of their Hausa cousins also live in Nigeria. In addition, Ghana and Benin give them access access to the ocean. Otherwise, many in the Zarma Songhai community will probably say that Mali and Burkina Faso are the best friends. Not only is business big between them, but they share the same history of empires, challenges in modern society, and to some extent culture. They also share many of the same people groups, and they have a shared dependence on the Niger River.
In conclusion, when you look at Niger, first you see, just sand and rocks, but then you see this incredibly fast-growing population. They've gotten this far and kept the colorful traditions alive. Let's see what the future holds for them. Stay tuned. Nigeria is coming up next.
All right. So that was Geography Now, Niger. This was a good episode. I thought it was well paced. I think it was a little weaker than the last couple episodes that we have gotten. Mainly because it just didn't feel like there didn't seem to be much substance here in what to talk about. At least maybe that's what their research pulled up. I don't know. It just felt like there was a lot of things said, but nothing dived deeper. Right? They didn't really go on. They didn't really look. It felt like they didn't really look into the country, and they just kind of was very more like, here are things that Niger has or whatever. That's the vibe I got this today. Maybe it's me. Maybe it's my vibe is off today. I don't know. Still a good episode. They still bring in good quality pretty consistently. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more. I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.